I think a lot of people are capable of working and are willing to work, but it's just the way it's set up. The mother and the children are better off if the husband isn't working or if the husband isn't there.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to the From the Bottom FS Reaction channel. Today we have on the channel for the first time Milton Friedman. You guys are requesting him like crazy, sending me a ton of information, a ton of videos. There's a great debate going down in like a lot of my Thomas Sowell videos with the topics of the welfare system and how and whether or not they hurt or helped the minority and the less fortunate inside their communities. And you guys are telling me he did a great video. So a little background on this guy, because I mean, I started reading about him a little bit, and his education is ridiculous. Started out with the National Bureau of Economic Research, then went to Columbia University, then went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, then went to the U.S. Department of Treasury, University of Chicago, University of Cambridge. I mean, the list goes on and on. If you guys just do a little bit of background, his like education background as far as economics and statistics go are insane. So definitely excited. This is a long one right here, so I'm gonna go ahead and chop it into two parts for you guys. This is of course gonna be part one. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Come on.
After the Second World War, New York City authorities retained rent controls, supposedly to help their poorer citizens. The intentions were good. This in the Bronx was one result. By the 50s, the same authorities were taxing their citizens, including those who live in the Bronx and other devastated areas beyond the East River, to subsidize public housing. Another idea with good intentions. Yet poor people are paying for this, subsidized apartments for the well-to-do. When government at city or federal level spends our money to help us, strange things happen. The idea that government had to protect us came to be accepted during the terrible years of the Depression. Capitalism was said to have failed, and politicians were looking for a new approach. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a candidate for the presidency. He was governor of New York State. At the governor's mansion in Albany, he met repeatedly with friends and colleagues to try to find some way out of the Depression. The problems of the day were to be solved by government action and government spending. The measures that FDR and his associates discussed here derive from a long line of past experience. Some of the roots of these measures go back to Bismarck's Germany at the end of the 19th century, the first modern state to institute old age pensions and other similar measures on the part of government. In the early 20th century, Great Britain followed suit. Under Lloyd George and Churchill, it too instituted old age pensions and similar plans. These precursors of the modern welfare state had little effect on practice in the United States, but they did have a very great effect on the intellectuals on the campus, like those who gathered here with FDR. The people who met here had little personal experience of the horrors of the Depression, but they were confident that they had the solution. In their long discussions as they sat around this fireplace, trying to design programs to meet the problems raised by the worst depression in the history of the United States, they quite naturally drew upon the ideas that were prevalent at the time. The intellectual climate had become one in which it was taken for granted that government had to play a major role in solving the problems, in providing what came later to be called security from cradle to grave. Roosevelt's first priority after his election was to deal with massive unemployment. A public works program was started. The government financed projects to build highways, bridges, and dams. The National Recovery Administration was set up to revitalize industry. Roosevelt wanted to see America move into a new era. The Social Security Act was passed and other measures followed. Unemployment benefits, welfare payments, distribution of surplus food. With these measures, of course, came rules, regulations, and red tape, as familiar today as they were novel then. The government bureaucracy began to grow, and it's been growing ever since. This is just a small part of the Social Security empire today. Their headquarters in Baltimore has 16 rooms this size. All these people are dispensing our money with the best possible intentions. But at what cost? In the 50 years since the Albany meetings, we have given government more and more control over our lives and our income. In New York State alone, these government buildings house 11,000 bureaucrats, administering government programs that cost New York taxpayers $22 billion. At the federal level, the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare alone has a budget larger than any government in the world, except only Russia and the United States. Yet these government measures often do not help the people they are supposed to.
All right.
Richard Brown's daughter, Halima, needs constant medical attention. She has a throat defect and has to be connected to a breathing machine so that she'll survive the nights. It's expensive treatment, and you might expect the family to qualify for a Medicaid grant.
No, I don't get it, because I'm not eligible for it. I make a few dollars too much. And the salary that I make, I can't afford to really live and save anything. That's out of the question. And I mean, we live from payday to payday. I mean, literally from payday to payday.
The struggle isn't made any easier by the fact that Mr. Brown knows that if he gave up his job as an orderly at the Harlem hospital, he would qualify for a government handout, and he'd be better off financially.
Well, Miss Davis.
Mr. Brown, didn't he say there's a section patient?
It's a terrible pressure on him, but he's proud of the work that he does here, and he's strong enough to resist the pressure.
So he's caught in between, you know, not having a job, but having a greater ability to take care of your children, between having a job and struggling and not being able to maybe supply the medicine and the equipment that she actually needs. You know, so it's, in his situation, it's not really a question of being, you know, lazy or, you know, not trying to get out there and get it. It's a question of, you know, what's better for his family right now in the immediate. You know what I mean? What can make the biggest impact on positively for my family?
He's proud of the work that he does here, and he's strong enough to resist the pressure.
Mr. Brown, and you're fully dilated, so I'm here to take you to the delivery room. Try not to push, please, because you want to have a nice, sterile delivery.
Mr. Brown has found out the hard way that welfare programs destroy an individual's independence.
We've considered welfare. We went to see if I'd apply for welfare, but we were told that we were only eligible for $5 a month. And to receive this $5, we would have to cash in our son's savings bonds. And that's not even worth it. But I don't believe in something for nothing anyway.
I think a lot of people are capable of working and are willing to work, but it's just the way it's set up. The mother and the children are better off if the husband isn't working or if the husband isn't there. And this breaks up so many poor families.
One of the saddest things is that many of the children whose parents are unwilling.
And it's kind of like crazy as well, like to hear her say that right next to her husband, and she knows, you know, she knows the plot, right? She knows what's going on. She knows what they're really trying to do here. And you can imagine how many other women who are also thinking the same thing, you know, while living with their husband. Like, you know, I can survive better off by myself. And if I remove you from the household, I can do a lot better for our kids and for my family. You know what I mean? Which, as we see nowadays, actually made a large negative impact in future generations after this happened. So it's crazy to know this video was made back in the 70s, back in 78 here, and seeing the progression, not even progression, but just seeing how it translated into our society as it is today. Man.
One of the saddest things is that many of the children whose parents are on welfare will in their turn end up in the welfare trap when they grow up. In this public housing project in the Bronx, New York, 3/4 of the families are now receiving welfare payments.
3/4, wow.
Well, Mr. Brown wanted to keep away from this kind of thing for a very good reason. The people who get on welfare lose their human independence and feeling of dignity. They become subject to the dictates and whims of their welfare supervisor, who can tell them whether they can live here or there, whether they may put in a telephone, what they may do with their lives. They're treated like children, not like responsible adults. And they're trapped in the system. Maybe a job comes up that looks better than welfare, but they're afraid to take it, because if they lose it after a few months, it may be 6 months or 9 months before they can get back onto welfare. And as a result, this becomes a self-perpetuating cycle, rather than simply a temporary state of affairs.
And another takeaway from this is also, once you take away work from a man, once you take away work from a man, you kind of take away his drive, his dignity, his purpose, his willingness to move forward. And, because what makes men in most cases, are your tribulations, what you've gone through in life, and how you fought and what you've been through in your experience. So with this situation, it's like you're sitting back, you're getting a check or whatever, but you're not experiencing anything. You're not experiencing any challenges, and that can make you, just sit in one spot and not feel like you're going anywhere. And I can only imagine how many, other things came from that, as far as the increased alcoholism and drug use of, you have all this time on your hands, but you're not really doing nothing productive. That had to have increased depression, every other aspect of your life in a negative way. There's no way around that. Let's get back to it.
Have gone even further elsewhere. This is a Hume Estate, a public housing project in Manchester, England. Well, we're 3,000 miles away from the Bronx here, but you'd never know it just by looking around. It looks as if we're at the same place. It's the same kind of flats, same kind of massive housing units, decrepit even though they were only built 7 or 8 years ago, vandalism, graffiti, the same feeling about the place of people who don't have a great deal of drive and energy because somebody else is taking care of their day-to-day needs, because the state has deprived them of an incentive to find jobs, to become responsible people, to be the real supports of themselves and their families.
And that's a good point right there. It's kind of showing that, it's not a race issue, it's a system issue, right? It doesn't matter where you're at. It's once you take that drive away from people, on an individual level, this is what's going to happen wherever you're at. So that's a good point you made right there. I like that. Let's keep it going.
Become responsible people, to be the real supports of themselves and their families. For the past 7 years, Maureen Ramsey has had to buy food and clothes for her family out of a government handout. For the whole of that time, her husband Steve hasn't had a job. Each week he collects what's known in Britain as Social Security. The government looks after him, his wife, and their children.
See what I mean?
But accepting welfare payments means accepting the rules.
And imagine as a son or as a daughter, and seeing your dad not necessarily going out there and getting it every day. You also not seeing he's not setting the role. He's not being that role model for the young men who are obviously watching him as he watches TV every day. You know what I mean? So it impacts so many different dynamics within the family. You know what I mean? Come on.
Of those who hand them out.
My opinion, anyway. You feel as they own you. There's no other way of putting it. Say I got a job tomorrow because I needed something. Well, I know that I've got to go down there and report it. Because I couldn't go into the job because you'd be looking over your shoulder thinking, oh, the Social Security's coming in. I'm going to be done for it. It's just hopeless. You can't fight against it.
The jobs around now these days, you only come up with about £45 a week. Then you deduct your stamp out of that. You still finish up with about £39. So what good is he working? When you still get the same thing, you know what I mean? I can't see any sense of it.
Of course, he's quite right that it may not pay him to get a job now. That's not his fault, and I don't blame him. He's acting sensibly and intelligently for his own interest and the interest of his family. It's the fault of a system which takes away the incentive from him to get a job. But suppose you were cruel and simply took away the welfare overnight, cut it off. What would happen? He would find a job. What kind of a job? I don't know. It might not be a very nice job. It might not be a very attractive job. But at some wage, at some level of pay, there will always be a job which he could get for himself. It might be also that he would be driven to rely on some private charity. He might have to get soup kitchen help or the equivalent. Again, I'm not saying that's desirable or nice or a good thing. It isn't. But as a matter of actual fact as to what would happen, there is little doubt that he would find some way to earn a living.
That's also true. You guys comment down below what you guys think about that. I think another thing that could happen there as well, if you just cut off the welfare system like overnight, not only is he not going to be able to find a job, but the crime's going to go through the roof. The crime's going to go through the roof. I mean, the streets will not be safe, man. For a little moment of time. I think over time it will get back to a normal state, but I think with that situation, you kind of have to wing it off, maybe a small portion at a time. So they know at the end of the day, this is going to cut off at some point, and you need to find a job full time. We're only here to help you for a moment, you know what I mean? Because you need help, you know what I mean? So, good point, man. But let me know what you guys think down below. Let's go.
The American government is trying to break the welfare trap. These people were unemployed. They're now being trained at the taxpayer's expense. It may, or may not, lead to a real job.
Here we have a vast national welfare system, which is diametrically opposed to everything that America believes in. Because America was founded on a work ethic, has practiced the work ethic, and has said this is what we want everybody to do, the opportunity to hold a job in America.
Everyone here has to clock in and do a full day's work. It's an attempt to make it seem like a real job.
We're saying a job is a part of the American way of life, and we're going to help you find a job so that you can get a piece of the pie, you can pay taxes, you can become a part of that American dream.
But the dream isn't working. Schemes like this, run under the government's Comprehensive Education and Training Act, CETA, have a high dropout rate, and many trainees end up back where they began, on welfare. The men and women who administer CETA and similar programs, the officials of the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, are dedicated people. Their motives are good. Their achievements are not. The results of these programs have been disappointing. Why? I believe that the basic reason is because it is very hard to achieve good objectives through bad means. And the means we have been using are bad in two very different respects. In the first place, all of these programs involve some people spending other people's money for objectives that are determined by still a third group of people. Nobody spends somebody else's money as carefully as he spends his own.
That's facts.
Nobody has the same dedication to achieving somebody else's objectives that he displays when he pursues his own. Beyond this, the programs have a insidious effect on the moral fiber of both the people who administer the programs and the people who are supposedly benefiting from it. For the people who administer it, it instills in them a feeling of almost godlike power. For the people who are supposedly benefiting, it instills a feeling of childlike dependence. Their capacity for personal decision-making atrophies. The result is that the programs involve a misuse of money. They do not achieve the objectives which it was their intention to achieve. But far more important than this, they tend to rot away. The very fabric that holds a decent society together.
If you think that's overstating the case, look what HEW found when it made a special investigation into the spending of the vast funds it administers.
We just got the plan from the Public Health Service on reducing the necessary beds.
In these reels of tape that record every payment made, every recipient,
Wow.
they found evidence that a staggering $7.5 billion had been lost by fraud, waste, and abuse in 1 year. Doctors, building contractors, hospitals, schools, welfare recipients, everyone had been fraudulently dipping into the pot, and the investigation isn't over yet. The inevitable consequence of having a huge pot of taxpayers' money is that all of us want to get our hands in it. You can be sure that we'll all be able to find very good reasons why we should be the ones to spend somebody else's money. Somebody or other put up a good case for spending taxpayers' money to subsidize rents in New York City, including the rents of these apartments. The people who occupy these apartments pay something like $200 a month less than the market rent. And that subsidy comes out of the taxes of people, most of whom are much poorer than the people who live here. It's not unusual for this sort of thing to happen when government tries to do good with our money.
That's crazy.
Look at what happened in Chicago. For most visitors, the immediate impression is of a rich, prosperous, bustling city. But like every large city in America, it has its problem areas. Overcrowded slums breeding poverty and crime. After World War II, one such area developed in Hyde Park. In the 50s, plans were drawn up to pull down large areas of slum building and to rebuild using government funds under an urban renewal program. It was to be a show project, replacing a blighted area with an integrated community. Who controlled the spending of that government money? It was, in fact, my own University of Chicago, which felt its very existence threatened by the spread of urban blight and crime. Government money was used to tear down an area that contained many small shops, as well as families of low income. Once the area was cleared, private money rebuilt it with middle-class apartments, townhouses, and shopping complexes. The blight had been cleared here, but only to be shifted elsewhere.
In many instances, when government administers large grants, a lot of those funds don't wind up directly serving the people and achieving the objectives that were the intent of the programs, because the grant has to feed that large government bureaucracy.
And that's a good point there too, because it's kind of like, I believe that's called gentrification as well. That's where they go into town and do exactly what he just said. They tear down, the low income area, the low income apartments and places to live, rebuild, and just jack up the rent to the point where the people that were staying in there can't afford to stay there anymore. And that it really doesn't solve the problem. That just makes those people move elsewhere. You know what I mean? And it makes it so people who can't afford those apartments move into those locations. So, I mean, that's crazy. Let's get back into it.
Gardner helped to set up an organization of local black people to protect their own interests. Previously, the blacks had rioted in the streets to try to get their way. Now it was to be done peacefully using government money. When government funds became available, the Woodlawn organization got control. They used them to build the kind of houses they wanted, low-rise apartments like these. The bureaucrats, planners, and architects told them that it was uneconomical, that only high-rise blocks would work. They were wrong.
So a lot of people have this view that the disadvantaged, if you will, have no idea of what their problems are and how to resolve them, that it takes outside professionals to do that. And we say that's baloney, because the outside professional does not feel in his gut what a woman on welfare with 6 kids living off $100 a month in a deteriorated building feels. She can come up with solutions much better than a bureaucrat.
The intentions of this local community group are good. They want to rebuild the community as the community wants.
I said, are you pretty pleased with the work we're doing?
Yes, I am very pleased with it.
But government money always corrupts. Look at the number of people rebuilding this garage. It doesn't make sense, except that these are CETA workers paid for by taxpayers' money. Government funds have allowed the organization to take over a whole area of Chicago. They now have their own supermarket. They've built splendid houses for middle-class occupiers, very expensive, protected by the latest security systems, all at the taxpayer's expense.
In a sense, TWO is rapidly becoming a mini government. At this particular point, we have approximately 400 employees. We have an operating budget of in excess of $5 million a year. So we are large.
Large and expanding. Their next project is to redevelop this site. And that's only the first step in a 20-year plan that will cost $220 million, most of it coming from the taxpayer. In the South Bronx, they're very familiar with government protection, like the rent controls that made it uneconomic for landlords to maintain their buildings. They've moved out and the vandals have moved in. The South Bronx is an area where many of the people are on welfare and where the crime rate is high. But all this could change. A group of local people has begun to renovate these buildings, to build new homes. They call themselves sweat equity, because at first sweat and effort.
And it's just interesting to watch, to watch as well, because they're trying to make a difference now. It's 30, 40 years ago, and Chicago's still one of the has some of the worst neighborhoods in the nation. Still has some of the worst crime in our nation. Some of the worst, the murder capital. You know what I mean? So this is not a simple fix, man. It takes time, apparently, but it looks like we haven't found the solution to actually getting this stuff done.
Build new homes. They call themselves sweat equity, because at first sweat and effort was all they could put into the project. Only later did they accept a small government grant.
How long ago did you start working on this building?
4 months ago. On this building, right here.
And I take it what you're going to do is gut the whole thing from beginning to end.
Right, totally gutted.
And you'll have to rewire.
Wire, put new walls up, new floors, new ceilings, new everything. Worked in the winter, worked in the summer, worked when I had the chance to work.
How many people have you got working here?
A good 40 people.
How do you keep them working? Some of them most want to get tired of it and pull off and so on. So how do you...
Try to keep them interested. We show them what could be done in the future, what will be done in the future. And they get, well, at first, it's kind of hard to prove to somebody that in the next 3 or 4 years, what will come out of it. They can't see it in the long-range term. They only see it in the short, and they need money right now, not in 2 and 3 years.
Sure.
So we try to show them that it will happen.
It's true they now accept some government money, but so far, they've managed to retain their original philosophy that the best way to get something done well is to do it yourself.
Like what we're doing, we're bringing people out of the street, giving them something to look forward to. They have their own apartment, they'll be taking care of the area around it, they have a garden, they have something to look forward to. They can even get off welfare, we can even get them a job. So they can drop the welfare and have some self-pride. That's the whole thing about it, self-pride. Because as long as you're collecting from the government and sitting back, you have no worries. We're not sitting back, we're working. We're making that money come in. And we're putting it into our buildings. We're building ourselves up as well as the building.
Some of these people are CETA workers, paid for by the taxpayer. But this isn't as useful as it might appear. You ask these fellows, which would they rather have, the CETA workers or the money that's being paid to the CETA workers? Which would you rather have?
The money paid to the CETA.
That's your answer? But that's very expensive help. In terms of what these people could use with the money, you give these people the amount of money you're paying to that CETA workers, and I'll bet they'll have twice as much, 3 times as much work out of it. Am I wrong?
You're right.
Exactly. So that's a very inefficient way to use that money. The problem is you've got a bureaucracy, and the government bureaucrats, they want to decide what to do. They don't want to let you decide what to do. Exactly. Ask yourself, how did this place get built up in the first place? After all, this was a pretty respectable, solid, substantial region when it was first developed. It wasn't done through a government project. It was done by people individually, having an incentive to put up these buildings and occupy them. What these people we've been seeing here are doing is they're trying to restore that feeling and that attitude. You'll have a far healthier community here if it grows out of the self-help of people like the people we've been talking to than if it's a paternalistic venture undertaken by governmental civil servants and bureaucrats who have to plan on a large scale for other people. We must find a way to give everyone caught in the welfare trap the kind of initiative these people have. The best, or should I say the least bad solution I have ever been able to devise is something called the negative income tax. This is the idea that we should get rid of a large part of the welfare bureaucracy and of the demeaning rules, that we should help people who are poor fundamentally by giving them money. With the positive income tax, you're entitled to a certain amount of personal exemptions and deductions, and above that amount you pay tax. But suppose you have no income. Under a negative income tax, a fraction of your unused exemptions would be paid to you by the government, guaranteeing at least a minimum income. If you earned something, you'd still get a fraction of your unused exemptions, and you'd end up better off. As your earnings rose, the supplement to your income would become smaller and smaller until your earnings equaled your exemptions. At that point, you'd break even, neither paying tax nor receiving a subsidy. It's not an ideal system. It's not the system we might have liked to get into, but it's a system which would have the effect of eliminating the separation of the society into those who receive and those who pay, a separation that tends to destroy the whole social fabric. It would mean that we could each of us take advantage of opportunities that opened up without fearing that if by some chance we lost our jobs, it would be a long time before we could get back on assistance. It would be a system that would give all of us an incentive gradually to improve our lives, would perhaps enable us over time to work ourselves out of the kind of mess we've gotten ourselves into. A mess we've gotten ourselves into
really good,
for the very best of motives, but with the very worst of results. We have become increasingly dependent on government. We have surrendered power to government. Nobody has taken it from us. It's our doing. The results? Monumental government spending. Much of it wasted. Little of it going to the people whom we would like to see helped. Burdensome taxes. High inflation. A welfare system under which neither those who receive help nor those who pay for it are satisfied. Trying to do good with other people's money simply has not worked.
All right, so that was part one of the Free to Choose, Milton Friedman on the welfare system. From the first half of this, we kind of saw direct results of people being on the system, what it can do to a family, how it can separate it, starting with the mom and dad, and how it can kind of take away that dignity of adults just going to work and taking care of their responsibilities. And part two is on the way, so make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe to this content, and comment down below what you guys think. Did the welfare system help at all, if any? And if not, let me know down below. Let's talk about it, man. Until next time, peace.